Look, we've all heard the horror stories. The Tuskegee syphilis study, for example, where black men were deliberately left untreated for syphilis just to see what would happen. While many unethical experiments throughout history have been widely publicized, there are some lesser-known horrific experiments that have not received as much attention. These weren't isolated incidents of a rogue scientist gone mad. So buckle up, Buttercup, because today we're diving into the murky depths of medical research gone wrong. Here are some disturbing examples that are not commonly featured anywhere. From the 1950s to the 1970s, Holmesburg Prison in Philadelphia was home to a dermatologist named Albert Kligman. Now you might think, dermatologist in a prison? That tracks. Lots of eczema in those overcrowded cells. But Kligman wasn't just handing out medicated lotion. Prisoners, often from marginalized communities and desperate for any sliver of hope or compensation, became Kligman's guinea pigs. We're talking about exposing inmates to high doses of dioxin, the same delightful chemical found in Agent Orange. Now, we know Agent Orange was no picnic in Vietnam, and it turns out it's not a great time on your skin either. But wait, there's more. Kligman also decided it would be a grand idea to pump inmates full of mind-altering drugs, LSD, because why not fry your brain while we're at it, right? And other psychoactive substances just to see what sticks. It was like a twisted game show. Will this prisoner develop superpowers or just crippling paranoia? Place your bets. And if that wasn't enough, prisoners were slathered in cosmetics and personal care products. This went on for decades, people. Decades. The full extent of Kligman's experiments is still largely unknown. Now, let's hop over to Brooklyn, New York, 1963. A time of hope, a time of change, a time when Dr. Chester Southam was injecting live cancer cells into elderly patients at the Jewish Chronic Disease Hospital. Yes, you heard that right. Injecting cancer cells into people who did not sign up for that. You see, Dr. Southam was on a quest, a noble quest you might think, to understand how weakened immune systems respond to cancer. But somewhere along the way, he seemed to have missed the memo on basic human decency and informed consent. These patients, many already grappling with chronic illnesses or diminished mental capacity, were told they were receiving some cells. Some cells? Can you believe the audacity? Let's talk about syphilis, shall we? It's not exactly a dinner party conversation starter, but it's a topic we can't shy away from, especially when it comes to the United States' role in some truly horrific experiments. Now, most people have heard of the Tuskegee syphilis study, but the story we're about to unpack makes Tuskegee look like a goddamn picnic. From 1946 to 1948, in the shadow of World War II, American researchers decided to take their act of scientific exploration down to Guatemala. And by exploration, I mean they were injecting prisoners, psychiatric patients, and sex workers with syphilis and other delightful sexually transmitted diseases. Because who needs consent when you have a petri dish with a pulse, am I right? Some subjects had bacteria pumped directly into their spines or genitals. Imagine the kind of depraved mind that thinks, you know what would make this experiment better? Let's just inject this syphilis directly into the spine. For science, it's enough to make you want to take a long, hot shower in bleach. The purpose of this grotesque human carnival? To test the effectiveness of penicillin. Many of the infected individuals were left untreated, their bodies left ravaged by the very disease these researchers were supposedly trying to combat. This whole disgusting episode remained buried for decades, swept under the rug like a particularly nasty stain on the American conscience. It wasn't until 2005 that a historian stumbled upon the evidence, blowing the lid off one of the most shameful chapters in American medical research. Now, let's talk about a place called the Willowbrook State School in New York. From 1955 to 1970, this institution, meant to care for children with intellectual disabilities, became a hotbed for one of the most ethically bankrupt medical studies in American history. Picture this: vulnerable children already facing immense challenges, being used as lab rats in a twisted experiment involving hepatitis. Now, hepatitis is no walk in the park. It's a nasty little virus that attacks the liver and can lead to a whole host of problems. But these researchers, blinded by their pursuit of knowledge, saw these children not as individuals deserving of care and compassion, but as opportunities to study the disease's progression. These kids weren't patients, they were data points. Parents, often desperate to secure a spot for their children in the overcrowded, underfunded facility, were coerced into giving consent for their children to be infected with hepatitis. Imagine the impossible choice. Leave your child in a horrific environment, or subject them to a potentially life-altering disease in the hopes of getting them better care. The researchers tried to justify their actions by claiming that the children would likely contract hepatitis anyway due to the appalling sanitary conditions at Willowbrook. The Willowbrook hepatitis study wasn't just bad science, it was a moral abomination. Our final stop on this tour of medical misadventures takes us to San Antonio, Texas in the 1970s. Now, Texas is known for doing things big hair, big trucks, and, unfortunately in this case, a big ethical lapse in judgment with the San Antonio contraception study. This study, focusing on contraception, targeted low-income and minority women, a demographic already facing systemic disadvantages and limited access to healthcare. Now, access to birth control is essential, especially for women facing economic hardship. But these researchers weren't interested in expanding access. They were more interested in playing a twisted game of roulette with women's bodies. The study involved giving women either placebos or actual birth control pills. Sounds simple enough, right? Except here's the kicker. The women weren't told what they were getting. They were kept in the dark, left to play a high-stakes guessing game with their reproductive health. Several women, believing they were protected, became pregnant. Look, it's easy to dismiss these stories as relics of a bygone era, a time when ethics were apparently optional and informed consent was as rare as a sober night in Vegas. But these weren't just isolated incidents. They were symptoms of a systemic problem within the medical research community. These experiments serve as stark reminders of the importance of ethical guidelines and informed consent in medical research. They remind us that progress cannot come at the cost of human dignity, and that the pursuit of knowledge should never eclipse our basic moral compass. Because only through constant vigilance and a commitment to ethical conduct can we hope to prevent the ghosts of these experiments from haunting the future of medical research. If you found this video informative, please like and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring more informative content to light.